sessions, or the last session before closing, and a parallel session. I have been just at 4 o'clock. We were just a few, so I went upstairs and got a mic finally to announce this session. And I hope that the room will be even fuller. But I'm very delighted to see that you made it for really one of the most important topics, I believe. Many of you are aware of these guidelines. We had more than 10,000 people putting in and contributing to the guidelines launched just in November of last year, just 3 months ago in UNESCO. These are the guidelines on the governance of digital platforms. And it is about how to do the magic of governing online platforms and ensuring freedom of expression at the same time, and addressing all the challenges and risks people are facing in terms of disinformation and hate speech. And particularly in a year of elections like this, there are many different scenarios of how also generative AI can intervene into democratic processes. And there are many challenges we will speak about today. And in these guidelines, there's an explicit reference to media and information literacy. And today, you will be part of the launch of the policy brief on media and information literacy and generative AI, which is this one. So it is online today. Oops. That's an early printout. We will have printed versions soon of that too. So this is the launch today, the launch session. And we have the privilege of having a distinguished panel with us. And one of the panelists is Divina Frau-Meigs, who is also the author of these guidelines on user empowerment through media and information literacy responses to the evolution of generative AI, and we will and the main author of this policy brief. And we have Luciano to my right.
You brought a 20-year-old photo of mine, so people are not really recognizing.
That's him. We use generative AI. So, who is ambassador and director of the Departments for Science, Technology and Intellectual Property at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he is also a key coordinator for the G20, which Brazil is chairing this year. And we have also to our right Alexandria Walden, who is Google's global policy lead for global human rights and free expression, and Mr. Marko Milosavljević. Say again, please.
Milosavljević.
That's what I wanted to say. Sorry for that. And he's professor and chair of journalism and the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana. So we managed to have you on the panel. On one hand, well, the author and academia, but also government and private sector. And that will be an exciting discussion. But to lay the grounds for the discussion, I invite Divina to introduce us to these guidelines, please, or policy.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, everybody, for being here after 2 intense days. I'll try to make the guidelines light. Though if you look at the policy brief, it's heavy reading in spite of it being 16 pages, because UNESCO always requires to look at the opportunities and the risks. But if you remember, a year ago, almost exactly, we were all in panic mode. Not only us, but the very inventors of AI. Remember? Existential risk, pleading for AI governance, etc. And I'm glad to say that I think we are beyond this stage now, and I had the feeling in this whole conference that we were more at the level of taking stock and thinking more of implementation. And maybe that's a part of the guidelines that I'll insist most about. But it's true that when we were assessing with UNESCO what was going on with AI, was it a panic, was it real? Where was the real panic? Is it about existential risk, or is it about some people left behind? We decided that, in fact, it was about users and citizens. And I insist, not just users, because in terms of regulation and governance of platforms, you can see that, for instance, Google has come out with guidelines on AI literacy. They're all user-oriented, and it's normal. They are a company. They are about how to use better Bard, Gemini, etc., etc. what about citizens? What about everyday users in their everyday life who are not going to be computer scientists, for whom AI is yet another requirement, it's a professional requirement? What about us in everyday life? What about us going into a supermarket and seeing, for instance, a certain number of cans of soup, and there's one of them, a lot of them by now, cans of soup you've noticed, and say where they've been made, what are the ingredients, if there's gluten or not gluten, what are the risks, etc., etc. What they expect us at the moment in terms of AI is a can of soup that just says, trust me. It's a black box and you have to accept it. Now, from the perspective of the citizen, this is not an acceptable answer. And so the need for oversight, the need for control, the need for an individual's mastery about what AI is about in everybody's life, that is not black box. It has to be transparent, it has to be trustworthy, it has to be appealed, it has to be actionable in case of abuse and bias, which we know by research that it exists. So this policy brief is totally about user empowerment from a perspective of citizens, which is why we look at all the advantages for citizens. There's no need, we're not going to throw that soup, that kind of soup in the garbage, but we are going to see what positive uses we can have, and also look at the risks. And unfortunately, we are in election years, and as you know, about half the population in the world is going to go to elections, and we know already that people get trapped by fake news provided by a new event in media, because we don't pretend at UNESCO CI to deal with all the aspects of AI. It's not about AI in health. It's not about AI in space. It's about AI in democracy. It's about AI in decision-making and in public opinion building and shaping. And we have a new type of media that we have to take into account, which are synthetic media. If there is a novelty that we have to take into account as users, voters, electors, is that there are some media that are only synthetic. Which is to say, the pictures they show have never been taken anywhere. They cannot be traced by Google AI, by any retrieving system. The texts and documents, the candidates, etc., don't exist in real life. For the first time, we have no correspondence anywhere with real life. Exciting in science fiction, a bit worrying in the reality of everyday decision-making. But so people now are having yet another layer, and maybe we'll talk about media and what happens to them, but another layer of media to take into account. And research shows, and if you follow NewsGuard, NewsGuard follows how many fake news and how many fake synthetic media exist, they grow by the day. So we have to train people to recognize this. We have to train citizens to be aware of that, use them maybe for some good purposes, maybe not. In any case, this is the why. We have to go into AI literacy, algo literacy, data literacy. In fact, data, algo, and AI literacy are all part of the same subset. And everybody agrees. Everybody I talk to in the guidelines, etc., it's obvious. Yes, AI literacy, media literacy. And then everybody leaves the room. It's done, checked. How do we go about it? How do we make sure that more and more people who are far away from education, from literacy, and yet have to make the choices of voting, etc. How do we make sure that these people are engaged and embarked in this new world in which we are going? And so the proposal in this brief, you don't have to adopt it, it's a proposal, it's a policy brief, is that the last thing you want to tell people, and especially teachers, educators, journalists who are dealing with this synthetic media, the last thing you want to tell them is you have to train in this new literacy, in this black box stuff, and jump there. We know by research it doesn't work like that. Teachers won't go into AI literacy if they don't feel trained. Same thing for journalists. So the proposal here is to come from a principle of familiarity. People are more and more familiar with media and information literacy. States like France, European Union have adopted it as one of the pillars to fight disinformation together with fact-checking. Many other countries and regions have followed suit. UNESCO has a very strong history of media and information literacy. They have just strengthened that sector and created literally a new unit about it. So there are resources. There are people who are trained. There are MOOCs and online courses that allow people to catch up and scale up. There are even MOOCs for policymakers, because policymakers are among the ones who need to be most trained, because they have to take decisions about something they don't know. They're just like teachers. Are they going to go and make decisions about something that's out there and that they don't know about? If they're responsible, I think they'll hesitate. So the idea is build on what we already have and step it up. And so the proposal is to include this AI literacy as part of media and information literacy because of a key notion of information that we all share in all the different cultures of data, of information, of media, and because of these synthetic media that are coming to challenge us. So this was the first idea. And then, of course, when you start talking about that, the how becomes clearer. Oh, we have to design curricula. Now, the two things that come out of this, the brief and the research coming from experiments from other colleagues, etc., is that there are two design principles that are absolutely necessary to add in the traditional media literacy design. One of them is explainability. Explainability is what allows you to put a label on the can. It says what quality of data have been taken in the input, what quality of data is out there, the source reliability. I mean, we can think of a criteria that can be put in explainability. And again, don't let anybody tell you you cannot explain what AI, generative AI does. We know now there's even ChatGPT in reverse that allows you to find back the different processes, the different branchings of, etc., etc. And yes, we understand that it can be a commercial secret. But nonetheless, the companies, in terms of regulation and platform regulation, have to be able to say, what are the data in entry? Do they respect a certain number of ethical principles, including the ownership of those who produce those data, the consent of those who produce those data, and the rights to appeal and to audit? These are the key elements of explainability that you as policymakers and regulators can require, and that we as citizens and users need to be empowered to trust and to engage. The second element that I'd like to put in is not just explainability in terms of the design and how we go about it. Please take it into account in your policy making. It's that we are more and more going to have to interact with non-human actors, non-human agents, robots, bots of different kinds. And we are not trained for that. We tend to project our emotions and our empathy on ChatGPT or on all these different robots. We think that they hallucinate They don't hallucinate. They make goddamn mistakes. They're intelligent. They're not intelligent. They are a statistically powerful engine driven by energy that can actually one day fail us. Thank you out there. Are you sure you're not a robot? Anyway, so we have to stop the marketing tools with critical thinking about why are the marketers of AI pushing the anthropomorphic approach? Why are we accepting that machines are supposed to share emotions, feelings, etc., when they do not? I mean, ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT will tell you, I am a machine, I don't feel. But if you keep a marketing buzz about that, you're going to be trapped. And if you're a young person, even more, because if you start very early, you're going to be acculturated to that and never question it again. So for policymakers, AI literacy starts at year 0. Okay, 1. But parents, as you know, put a lot of these machines in the arms of children very early. And so absolutely start early, often in disciplines. I am actually advocating for a change in curricula where media and information literacy is part of the core curriculum. And the last thing is, you regulators can regulate all you want. If your users, your voters, are not trained to apply and implement your regulation, it will not be used. So in the EU, we have this beautiful AI regulation coming out. It talks about transparency. It doesn't mention once education, media literacy. It doesn't mention the empowerment of users. It is assumed by the policymakers, but it remains too abstract for them to be engaged, to engage their people. So it is absolutely necessary in the design of media literacy and AI literacy to put in there the last element, the last brick, which is the law, the regulations that exist, and how users, citizens can be empowered to use them. So this is basically the 16 pages in 5 seconds or 5 minutes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Divina, so much for... Yes, for explaining so concisely the approach, the design principles, with highlighting explainability, the importance of education, and how to deal with non-human agents. And of course, you said also that everybody can agree to MIL in principle, yes. But what are we really doing? And in our multi-stakeholder approach, we're looking at different government, private sector, and so on, solutions, approaches, policies. And I hand over to Luciano to tell us more about the policy approach of the Brazilian government to deal with the phenomenon of synthetic media, as Divina just highlighted, but also more about the media information literacy approach, please.
Well, thank you, Cedric. Well, I think as was outlined here, we are talking about something that is necessarily part of a broader toolkit. I think, in our perspective, dealing with this phenomenon is not possible to be based on a single policy component. So, in the Brazilian perspective, we're talking about something that's, let's say, multi-pronged, but that has one of its main components, MIL, for sure. And I think we're very much aligned with UNESCO. As you know, we participated strongly in the discussion of the guidelines. And that's for a reason. We see this issue within the context of the promotion of information integrity. And under this concept that we think we have to address several issues related to how to promote and support information integrity in different fields, in different domains, through different tools, depending on context and situation, the kind of problem that we are specifically facing. Brazil, and then MIL is part of this effort, and Brazil launched the Comprehensive Media Education Strategy in October 2023. I must say that it does not focus on specific AI use cases, but it analyzes in detail the context in which it must be implemented, including AI systems and generative AI in particular. The strategy is very much centered on the notion that we must build critical knowledge. So that's the basis. I think that's the centerpiece that links all the elements of the strategy as a tool to face the various challenges AI presents. It points in particular to the need of transparency of AI systems, of course, and social responsibility of AI actors at a time when generative AI tools seem to be moving towards even greater opacity in some respect. We know that coming years will bring an even more disruptive transformation in the expected emerging capabilities in the next generations of language and multimodal models that are already incorporated into chatbots, simultaneous translation, automatic creation of multimedia and content applications, among other applications. Therefore, from a perspective, we must seek that these artificial intelligence tools, which will soon mediate much of our contact with information consumption and the digital environment itself, are trained in a way, in a fashion that are able to provide clear and reliable explanations about their own internal operating mechanisms. So I think the discussion of transparency and explainability is in the core of what we must to achieve in this conversation. And of course, it's something that's not within the sole capacity of governments. And then I think the strategy conveys the clear message that MIL programs are an essential piece in the toolkit to address the challenges and impacts of AI and of generative AI in particular, but that there is not enough. So we must address this in a broader way. In this kind of comprehensive approach that we think is necessary to address those issues, in addition to MIL, we believe that certain regulatory measures may be necessary, and that comes again when we discuss explainability, for instance. That we need political policies to promote interactive information, including diversity and sustainability of journalistic sources and for journalism in general. That's something that is crucial for this effort. And also that we need non-judicial mechanisms for accountability and promotion of rights. When it comes to regulation, something that I wanted to mention in this regard, that we believe that it's necessary to deal with and to consider as high risk certain systems. So large-scale, massive-scale systems that produce, curate, diffuse, spread and recommend and distribute news content and public interest information should be seen and considered as high-risk systems, and therefore would require specific regulatory approaches. We also believe, and I think that's something that must be discussed in technical terms as well, how it's possible, when it's possible, and that requires engagement with several actors in the system, that there should be obligation in terms of watermarking of certain content, and also record of origin of content that is built or significantly modified by generative AI. We also, something very much in consideration in Brazil, is electoral legislation, electoral law, should restrict the use of AI with the objective of creating confusion and manipulating the electoral process. And that's something that's very much in consideration in Brazil, and we have heard the president of the electoral court that in the case of Brazil, they have powers to regulate the electoral process, so it's very likely that they may have some specific legislation on this before for the election that we have in Brazil this year. So just to conclude, I think it's clear in our perspective that we need a comprehensive approach on this. And it's also clear that this disruption provoked by AI applications, in particular generative AI applications, point to a very challenging scenario. And most likely, the tools that we have available right now may not be enough to ensure an environment that is, let's say, governed by information integrity. So something that hopefully we can move along and find the right answers along the process. Thank you, Cedric.
Thank you, Luciano. That was really an exciting introduction, and I think with some aspects it would be a better world that some of these approaches and would be already applied. You outlined a holistic approach and linked it to the information integrity concept, and highlighted the need for transparency, explainability, accountability, for the critical, the necessity to build critical knowledge, and regulatory measures too. And so that's an interesting thing. And we will open up after first round here also to you. So get ready for some questions. I will ask you to come here so that online participants can see you too, if you want to address any of the questions to our panelists. But now I hand over to Alex first. Over to you. I think you're most welcome to also contradict or compliment, other panelists. We heard some things, which you might agree on, disagree on, but everybody agrees on MIL to start with. No?
That's right. That's right. Well, first, yes, thank you for including Google on this panel. These issues are sort of very close to the things that we hold dear and value at Google. Maybe I'll start there because I think, when we think about our commitment to these issues, it really starts at the top of the company from our mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That informs all of the ways we have thought about AI and continue to think about generative AI as we implement it across our products. We also have a long-standing commitment to human rights grounded in the UN Guiding Principles in Business and Human Rights, as well as things like the Global Network Initiative principles, which are multi-stakeholder principles focused on freedom of expression and privacy. That has also long informed our work, and we do independent assessments as part of that, again, continues to help us improve. And then we have our AI principles. We were one of the first big companies to launch AI principles. We did so in 2018, and those principles include things like ensuring that the work we do is socially beneficial when it comes to AI, and then also things that we call our red lines, which ensure that we aren't doing anything to develop or deploy AI that contravenes international law and human rights. So those are just some kind of big picture kind of commitments and principles that we have inside of Google that inform the ways in which we think about the types of AI that we deploy across our products, what we sell, and then of course the ways in which we engage with stakeholders and the broader ecosystem to address harms as they occur. So, just thinking about sort of information literacy, the topic of this panel, this is one where we've long engaged on this topic in particular. AI is something Google has been working on for over 2 decades. As you know, if you use Google Search or Maps, or if you use Smart Compose in Gmail, these are features that have long existed and continue to improve. And so we've been thinking about what are the policies that we have on our products, how do we continue to improve the features and their accuracy, how do we, when we're making an error, allow for users to understand what the process is for them to make an appeal and alert us to an error. So, we've heard a lot about governance across the past few days, and obviously that's really important to be happening across the ecosystem, but also very important to be investing in inside the company, and we've been doing that for a long time. We recognize that it's sort of one company alone can't be the kind of solution, that it requires all stakeholders to participate, and we need to do our part. So of course there's a role for government, there's a role for journalists and teachers and citizens, but then also companies. And so one of the first things that we did was, I guess now it was maybe 7 years ago or so, we launched something called Be Internet Awesome, which was a digital citizenship training for kids, essentially, about how they should use the internet. And we've continued to build on that work. And last year, when we improved and kind of began to implement generative AI into search, we launched something called, it's basically an AI literacy guide for search. And that's focused on teen users, meant to help them understand the ways in which they might be engaging with content on the internet and in our products, to make sure that they are kind of being smart about how they engage. And so it is really important for us to develop tools, collateral, and resources for the users themselves, but not just the users. It's also important for us to think about how we're educating developers, because they're sort of an intermediary in the process. And so whatever it is that they're developing and how they're using our products to develop new things, they should understand what good practices are as well. And so when we're thinking about tools and resources, developers are another audience that both have a responsibility, but we have a role to play in making sure that they're educated about what good practices are. I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk more about it, but I just want to underscore that I think in this area in particular, there is a lot that we have done and certainly still more to do, and partnership is an important part of that, but that there's a role for everyone in living up to what these guidelines aspire to.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you also for contributing actively to the guidelines and here also to the implementation of the ethics recommendation. So we value, the private sector and the multi-stakeholder approach in UNESCO is built in. And it makes only sense if all forces pull together. And you highlighted all the work Google has done in terms of error appeals, address harms, and so on. And we might hear more from everybody about that too. But before that, I hand over to Marko, who is really, as I mentioned, looking also at the question to which extent MIL should be part of the core competencies of journalists today, and what it means really also to overcome new technological challenges in journalism education. I hand over to you, please.
Thank you. First, about the MIL, let me put it this way. Recently, we tried to do this in 3 different forms and in 3 different levels. We worked with Council of Europe as a member of expert group on the adoption of guidelines for the responsible use of AI in journalism and newsrooms. We are working on a large European Horizon project, Diacomet, which is looking into self-regulation, ethics, and ethical responsibility regarding MIL, AI, and all the other relevant aspects. And currently we're analyzing approximately 300 codes of ethics within EU regarding journalists, PR people, politicians, and many others to find out the shared ground, but also, of course, all the differences between different stakeholders and so on. And the third level, so to speak, is a national level, where I'm happy to say that Slovenia has recently presented its new draft law on mass media, which is, in my information, the first draft law, at least, that will regulate generative AI in media and not just in journalism. I hope that this will be sort of adopted, merely to sort of present the first step towards that proper regulation, which in my opinion needs to be done. Now, when it comes to the skills and teaching of journalists and the others, I had a project recently interviewing many editors of digital and other newsrooms around the world, from New York Times to Guardian and Deutsche Welle and so on. And the former editor of digital at Guardian, Aaron Pilhofer, said something very interesting. He said, if your job can be taken away, if you're a journalist and your job can be taken away by AI, then you should ask yourself whether that was journalism in the first place. And sometimes I think of this also in terms of conferences, I must say. So, if something can be sort of prepared in advance by ChatGPT or talking points and so on, then I don't think that people will like that conference and go on. So I have something that I want to ask you, and that is that you cross your arms. Can you cross your arms, please? It won't hurt, I promise. But just cross your arms. And now cross it the other way around. Yes. What usually happens is that we do certain things almost automatically within half a second. And whenever you want to implement a change, you need time and you need to have some will. That happens in politics, that happens in user experience when you're a private company. Whenever Google or Facebook changes something, everybody is against it. And of course, that happens also in journalism. The people prefer the old ways because it's sometimes easier. But I can also tell you that recently, because of all the things that have happened to journalism, I've seen that a lot of people have, in a way, adapted to that. They have adapted also to the cruel reality of, let's say, algorithms. Today, you will see very little of previous poetic headlines in the media. Sometimes you would have a comment that would be titled, "For whom the bell tolls, the unbearable lightness of policymaking," or whatever. And now that's all gone. It's all gone mostly because of the company over there, Google. It's not your fault in a way, but the Google doesn't like poetic headlines. They like certain keywords and they like names and they like people. And if you looked at the headlines a few days ago after Grammys were given in the US to music industry, you would have the impression that Taylor Swift was the big winner, because Taylor Swift was in every single headline I could see almost about the Grammys. And she was on almost every single picture from US, UK, Germany, France, and so on. She was there basically because of the algorithms, because the algorithms prefer big names and big stars and they put you on top. The actual big winner of Grammys was a person called Phoebe Gransma, a girl from a band called Boy Genius. She won 4 Grammys. Miley Cyrus won 2 major awards, bigger than Taylor Swift. But the algorithms dictate what is happening today in the newsroom. They dictate what kind of headlines we get. They dictate also what kind of pictures are posted and what kind of pictures cannot be posted. And that is why I believe that MIL should always be put in the context and in combination with the governance, the importance of governance, the importance of clear rules, of transparency, accountability, not to have this sort of black box, but to have a sort of transparent box as much as possible. And of course, to have some responsibility. You mentioned small children, and AI-generated images will have even worse effects on children than the current trends of sort of photoshopped, filtered photos on Instagram had on small kids. They can have devastating effect. And we've seen that those devastating effects also last week with Mark Zuckerberg in Congress facing parents of kids who died because of the cyberbullying or some other social media related issues. So in my opinion, media literacy is extremely important. We are implementing it. We should implement it not just for journalists, we should implement it for politicians. If you check the European Media Freedom Act, you won't see a word journalism almost anywhere in the document. It's about service providers, it's about content creators and so on. The journalism is in a way gone from some of the documents, which I think is not good, because journalism has a special role. Like users are different from citizens. Users are a sort of market-driven topic. Citizens are something general, and it's same with journalism versus other content creators. So it could be implemented in, and it should be in a way adopted in many ways. So that is for me from now.
Thank you so much. I think there would be many things to be said, and thank you for highlighting both or 3 points related directly to media information literacy. Please, people, participants, get ready to ask a question, and if you want, please come to the front so people online can see you too, and I will hand you the mic. But here, just to highlight that you highlighted media and information literacy in journalism education, also the law, the draft law being prepared, but also some of the realities. And I think, for example, the Taylor Swift might be attention might also be linked to the fake porn pictures which were there during that time and were taken down afterwards. But there is also another link to that too. You mentioned cyberbullying also as an important other aspect. Is there any of the participants who would like to ask a question to the panelists before I do? Yes, can you come to the front so that, please, so that that you can speak? You know, so yeah, yes. No, so it's just so that online participants can see you and can hear you well. Thanks for that. And please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jayant. I am currently working in a cross-agency UN project on AI. My question is both oriented towards the private sector representation here, but also the policy aspects of it. We are hearing a lot of tools like watermarking being discussed, but there's also a lot of research which shows that it can be altered with and it's not foolproof. And Google, even before US came out with any sort of formal legislation, developed its own policy about inauthentic content and political ads. So my question is, especially from a policy-making perspective, is that the answer? Because a lot of this control will, at the end of the day, be through the digital platforms which are distributing the content, even if they're not generating the content. So do you need these sector-specific guidelines and regulations? Would you require, for example, any company which distributes ads, like political ads, to have this as a formal sort of regulation, instead of relying on things like watermarking, which is not foolproof? So the blend of two, and also what would be the reaction from the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are collecting 2-3 questions and then handing over to the panel. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Oliver Marsh from Algorithm Watch in Berlin, Germany. Very quick question. I was wondering to what extent your various work has built on, learned from, or intersects with particularly the Digital Services Act in Europe.
Hello, I'm Katharina Zügel from the Forum on Information and Democracy. So one approach to tackling disinformation, loss and trust in the information world is by pushing out or recreating a trustful system. One, there's all the work about content authenticity and provenance, but what role, like what other elements are there, and what role do you see on the one hand for the private sector, but also for regulation to create again a trustworthy information ecosystem?
Good. Okay, we take the last one now. And then we'll have another.
Thank you. Domen Savic, Citizen D NGO from Slovenia. So welcome to Slovenia, guys. I have a question regarding the media aspect of the current implications for artificial intelligence, media literacy, or artificial intelligence literacy in regards to other existential threats that are being present in the big platform moment. So in my opinion, we're talking too much about deepfakes that have yet to prove its significance in regard to disinformation, but we're completely almost neglecting the issue of, let's say, surveillance advertising. That has been here longer, let's say, than the issue of deepfakes and still hasn't been resolved. So I would like you sort of to hear your thoughts on the issue of media flashiness of the current threats, forgetting everything that we're leaving behind almost unresolved. Thank you.
Thank you. So a number of topics and issues. Who wishes to respond first? Alex.
Why not? I can touch on a few. The question about watermarking and sort of how valuable is that? From Google's perspective, that is an area that we've been working on for a long time, and we think that it's important to continue to invest in both watermarking and then things that we've started to test out, like this product we have called SynthID, which has begun rolling out to our cloud customers. Similar to watermarking, it's about identifying images that are generated. I think when it comes to this issue, there's not going to be any single solution. There's no panacea. We have to, from the tech company side, continue to experiment and innovate around ways that we can get ahead of how bad actors might manipulate our platforms and services. And that's something we've long been doing, and we fully expect to continue to do that when it comes to generative AI and manipulative media and users. So again, like I think it's important for us and other companies and other actors in the ecosystem to continue to invest in things like watermarking, but it won't be the be-all, end-all. And also, you know, this is maybe more, I don't remember, I was taking notes on the questions. To the question about the intersection of DSA, but this also gets to the first question too. One of the important things about DSA is it really focuses on the company's governance of these issues. What are the systems we have in place to deal with, consider, identify, and address harms related to content issues? And many of those issues are ones that we're seeing in the generative AI space as well. So thinking about, does your company have a way to create policies for its products? Is it informed by stakeholders and other experts when you develop those? Do you have transparency and accountability and appeals, and research, access for researchers, and are you doing your own internal research and UX research? All of those things are things that come up in the context of DSA that will be relevant for the work that we're doing on generative AI broadly. I'll stop there because I know others will have input on the other questions.
No, just a point I wanted to mention. I think we're aware that there are technical issues, those sorts of solutions. But in the end, I think every little helps, because I think critical knowledge and critical thinking will go until a certain way. The problem I see is we have nowadays a situation where people are well informed. If they are well informed, if they can understand their technical environments, can understand that things may not be true, they can be skeptical about it. But there's a landing zone where you can have a critical skepticism that converges with a non-critical skepticism. People just think, no, that's not true. That may not be true. And you don't really want to know if it's true or not. So somebody that's really, let's say, capable of thinking about it, let's say, will be a well-informed, skeptical person. But somebody that simply does not want to know will be also skeptical, and nobody knows if that's true or not true. And that plays in the hand of those that are just wanting to disseminate this information and just make a confusion about what's real, what's not real. And so I think if we can move with some technical solutions that even if they're not perfect, can help separate one thing from the other, I think that's something that's necessary, because only, and that of course, it's part of a discussion on governance solutions for that regulatory solutions for digital platforms as well. They'll have the responsibilities on this, and that's its system and legislation is dealing with alternatives. But I think that's something that will be necessary to some extent, and hopefully the technical solutions will evolve and will get better. So just this comment I wanted to make.
Yes, I'll try to gather several other questions. My NGO, which is called Savoir Devenir, has a European project, because funding research is part of all this stuff. And the EU has been funding research on media literacy and fact-checking. And there's a line in the Creative Europe program that funds projects on a yearly basis. And that's big because it allows us to see the impact and the evaluation of different media literacy projects. So at the moment, we're conducting one called Algo Watch, which wants to make everybody into watchers of algorithms. And we zero in onto algorithms because we think they are the key, and data as well. And we don't want to fall into the trap to start answering your question about where the panic is putting the focus and where the real light should be. JAI needs data and needs algorithms. So we have to present all of these to the public and to learners. And to all learners, because there's two big gaps that are at risk here. One of them is the gap between STEM disciplines, science, technology, math, and humanities. even digital humanities. And if teachers, professors at university, etc., are not trained to methodologies in which they can use AI, the humanities are going to lag behind. And you know what? At the moment, when we talk about intelligence, which is a topic of philosophy, when basically everybody speaks about explainability, and I like to add interpretability, because when you get these data, you have to interpret, and interpretation is very human. We need to strengthen the humanities. They're being cancelled. They're being cancelled. In Florida, sociology is cancelled. So beware of that. Gender gap, research shows that women are left behind. Girls are not supposed to be mechanical, technical, etc. And we have a problem there. So I know UNESCO is particularly watchful about that, but you all have to be. We all have to be. So these are two points that I wanted to highlight. The last point is teachers, educators want watermarks. They don't have time. They don't have time to check. They need their governments, their ministries, etc., to tell them this has been approved. This is safe for you to use in the classrooms. Otherwise, they won't adopt. Business will suffer, users will suffer, citizens will suffer. So the technical tools, smart ones as they're becoming, are important. And that's where teachers need to talk to developers and designers. We developed a project called InVid We Verify, which is a plugin on video verification with teachers. And they said, we don't want to be fact checkers. We don't want to be developers of plugins. We want you to give us a database of verified fakes. And then we'll use them in our practice. You know, they know how to step up, but within their practice. So that's very important. And the last point I want to say to Google and to all the other GAFAMs and the Chinese ones and all the others that in which a lot of other countries are not getting into monopoly, is that, yes, for instance, and please go see the AI literacy guide of Google. You're the first ones to do it, so I'm zeroing on you. Do they mention where they take these principles from? When you look at the guidelines, it doesn't say anything about the UNESCO, the SDGs, the SDA, etc., etc. It's all under terms of contract. It's about us and conditions of use in Google. Fine, but where do we align ourselves as humans? What is this work done by UNESCO, by all these international institutions to which they say they contribute as multi-stakeholders? Where do they show the multi-stakeholder work to people who are going to use it at the everyday level? And that's what I'm saying is, if people are not aware of regulation, of how you align on a common vision of where we want to go, what is the meaning of this AI? What are the end users of AI? At the moment, what I have a feeling is the genie is out of the box. We can do that, so let's do it. And then suddenly we panic. This is not how we're going to win the battle of collective intelligence here. So if you are sincere about aligning on UNESCO, UN values, show it.
Thank you, Divina. Marko?
I have just a few follow-up thoughts also regarding the questions of Sona, but it's sort of, they are kind of mixed up in my head right now. But I would say two important things. We are now discussing, on one hand, deep fakes, generative AI, this and that. I think that we still have to discuss two key aspects of the AI as such within the media or media literacy and so on. One is algorithms and the other is generative AI. These two things, I think, are the key aspects of AI within the media, social media, and so on, and also having a tremendous effect on our democracy. Algorithms. Go to the search engine and check famous artists. Look at Helmut Newton. Look at pictures from Robert Mapplethorpe. Look at Egon Schiele. You will see that their results, that their art is being censored. It is not there. You need to know how to find pictures from Helmut Newton that are probably seemed as, I don't know, corrupted or immoral or so on by search engines, including, of course, Google. But that is giving the wrong impression to our kids. That is giving the wrong impression to our society about the arts. It's giving the wrong impression about many artists. If you don't believe me, go to YouTube and type in Cock Robin. Now, that was a very innocent pop band from the 80s. They had this sort of mistake of naming themselves Cock Robin before the YouTube and everybody else was functioning. But if I'm correct, in most of your telephones, you won't have that as auto-suggestion. Once you type in cock, R-O-B, it will stop. They don't want to show you things that move on from there. They softened that, but until recently, there were similar problems with Marvin Gaye, because he had G-A-Y in his surname. And we had this same issue with famous communication scientists, such as Gay Tuckman, famous literary journalists, such as Gay Talese, and so on. So, of course, you have all these sort of issues with algorithms, as I've mentioned previously, also with journalism. And, of course, there are all these examples also here in Slovenia of pictures being taken down from one platform or another, from the picture of the burning village in Vietnam, or the pictures from Tiananmen, or many other aspects, basically being labeled as this or that. I had a picture of front page of German magazine Max with a picture that was done by Helmut Newton, written on the front page, removed from Instagram in a second. So they can see that is immoral. But it's a media outlet, and it's a legitimate, like Der Spiegel and so on. It's a general magazine like GQ magazine or Esquire. And they had a picture from Helmut Newton on the front page, clearly saying Helmut Newton. It was moved down in a second. So there are algorithms showing us a filtered, censored version of reality. And then there is generative AI, which we are talking mostly about in content creation. But generative AI is also the key tool for the ad increase or increase in ad revenues from the platforms. The advertising revenues from Facebook has increased by 16% last year, mostly according to their official sources, because of the generative AI being used in better advertising and individual advertising and targeting and so on. Google has increased its ad revenues by 6%. Both of them combined have the ad revenue of $370 billion US. And then, of course, you expect a few fact checkers in Slovenia, a few in Italy, a few in Germany, a few in Sweden to verify all the content that is there when there is no more or sufficient funding for the media or journalism in these countries, where the governments talk about, like you said, yes, MIL, but then when it comes to financing the programs, the research or media, then of course the problem comes, and that the sort of ChatGPT reactions, like yes, we all like MIL, we all are concerned about AI, but then the problem is what next?
Thank you so much, Marko. I don't know if any of you has a last shot, like one phrase statement to add before we are closing. Would you like Luciano or Alex, or is it good? Okay. So to say what you just highlighted, Marko, is actually really part, and I warmly recommend this today launched policy brief again. You were highlighting just about AI and generative AI, but it is also about algorithm and the engagement of people with information, as you said, and search engines and generative AI now is a way to engage, and it is also about how we highlight here, about control and human agency, and the question around that. And we have spoken today also about user empowerment, about the ethical use of synthetic media, as we started, about disinformation, data privacy, surveillance, explainable AI, source reliability, and many other parts. I really would like to thank you for having participated actively and stayed on until the end. And now we're coming to the closing, and I'm asked to close sometimes too. But I warmly invite you to applaud the panelists here, and I thank you for your active participation in this session.
Time is always short. So. Time is always short.